kick it right off. So today we're going to be talking about how to get alignment with senior leadership. And as always, I'm going to do a quick pulse check. I'm assuming that if you signed up for this webinar, it's because your leadership alignment maybe isn't quite where you want it to be. So I'm going to ask you all, don't be shy. On a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being, oh my gosh, my leadership team, they're reading my mind. We're on the same wavelength. What I want to do, they want to do. That's a 5. 1 is everything is an argument. It is a battle. It feels like we are two different companies. Where are you? Okay, we're seeing a good mix. Some 3s, some 1s, some 2.5s. Okay. All right, so let's call on someone who's on one end of the extreme, Nicole Burzins. Amanda, if you could unmute Nicole. Nicole, tell me a little bit more. How did you land on a 1? Why? What does this feel like? What's that dynamic like for you all?
Well, I think that's first I want to say that's my perception. We're a startup company that is moving really quickly into launching for regulatory approval. And oftentimes the senior leadership, just doesn't understand maybe the regulatory requirements. And so it's a constant battle to portray that information, have it be heard, and understand the implication. So I'd like to change the tides so that maybe they're asking regulatory first before they make decisions. It doesn't mean they're not listening. It just means we're not always in what I think could be the fastest cadence for alignment.
I think that's a super great distinction and disclaimer to make, right? Which is, at the end of the day, we are all on the same team, right? But there are some challenges that we may need to navigate. We may not be all speaking, quote unquote, the same language with each other, right? So HR language is very different from leadership language, sometimes depending on the context, or business language. So I think that's a really great context there. So thank you very much, Nicole.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Let's call on someone else who's maybe in the middle ground. What about Katie Sheffroth? And I'm so sorry if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. Please correct me. Amanda, if you could give her access to unmute and contribute.
Great, thank you. So I shared that I would say we're a 3 because we are a very transparent and open communicating organization, and it really starts with our leadership team, our senior leadership team. I think they do a great job of that. I think where we struggle a little bit is everybody has kind of different needs. And a lot of us, because we're a fast growing organization, have recently joined the organization. And so we come with different perspectives as well as those different needs. And so sometimes it's difficult to understand who's the decision maker, whose needs are we going to prioritize over others, and then really make sure that we're communicating out the who and the why. But I think that once we figure those things out, do a pretty good job of making sure that we then communicate it with the broader organization. So that's why I stuck us in a 3. There's a lot of trust there too, but sometimes we have louder voices than others. So we also have to make sure that we're hearing everybody's perspective and needs.
I think that's a really great answer, in particular because what's super insightful there is, we know that diversity and inclusion, right? That really leads to success and innovation. And also, in order to actually make diverse, inclusive approaches work, we need to find a way to make them work together, right? We need to find a way to make sure that one voice isn't louder than another's, that we're actually building a space for everyone to be heard. And so I like that you're talking about different personalities, different perspectives, which is a good thing, right? And also, how do we make that effective? How do we talk to each other in a way where we can all listen and hear each other out? So thank you. I'm going to call on just one more person because I want to get the full gamut of extremes here. Alexandra Bullhawk, you have given a 4.5, which is nearly a perfect score. Could you please go ahead and unmute yourself and tell us just a little bit more about this score?
Yeah, so my leadership team senior leadership team strives to be extremely transparent, and that's amazing and great. And whenever they're asked tough questions on Q&A during all hands, they do answer very honestly and transparently. I think the reason I kind of docked at a few points is I find it's a bit more reactive versus being proactive. So that was kind of my reasoning for docking a bit. Yeah.
That's a really great point. I see that all the time, where, I think one of the key things, or one of the key priorities within the HR function or the people function, is you are trying to be proactive, right? You're trying to address problems before they become a problem. And unfortunately, it can be really hard to get buy-in from leadership until after it's a problem, after it's a proven, it's having a proven impact on revenue, for example, or whatever the case may be. So I super hear you on the reactive versus proactive approach and how that can cause some issues, despite, a high level of transparency. What I really like about seeing these responses is we've got a full gamut of people feeling all the way from 1 to 4.5. And yet we still have, whether you're a 4.5 or a 1, people on this call, which is really great because it means whether you've got great alignment or not great alignment, it's always a good idea to do a pulse check, to really get reflective and think about how can I get better alignment with senior leadership, between senior leadership and HR. So thank you all for tuning in. I am very excited about today's call. So what I'd like to do in the next slide is I want to take a moment just to acknowledge the stress and frustration that can come with a lack of alignment. Unfortunately, the HR function actually has the highest turnover rate of all job functions currently. 53% of HR professionals are burnt out, and 48% of us are looking for new jobs. I say that not to intimidate, but rather because I think that, having seen the size of some of our teams, right? We've got teams of 1, teams of 2. It can feel really isolating, maybe alienating, to be in this position and feel frustrated and not know what the solution is. And so what I want to encourage us all to do is to be a people community for each other, to be dropping comments in the chat box, and just to acknowledge that you're not alone, right? You saw many other people give 1s, 2s, right? The full gamut of responses. Know that, yes, it can be frustrating. And also there are people who care, who are dealing with the same challenges. And hopefully what we're going to do today and what you're going to come out of today's call with is some actions that you can take to move forward and move the dial forward when it comes to alignment between senior leadership and HR. All right, so with that said, let's get to it. So the first thing that every HR team needs to be thinking about when it comes to building greater alignment between senior leadership and HR is building a team of allies. Now, what do I mean by that? We need to sort of start from the beginning. I'm sure this is not going to come to a surprise to most of you, right? Until not too recently, the role of HR and people was really seen as purely administrative, right? Payroll and benefits, onboarding and offboarding, paperwork. Can I get a yes in the comments section if you know what I'm talking about? If you're like, yep, 5 years ago, all people wanted from me was payroll and benefits. Yep. Okay, Charlene. Yep. Okay. So, okay, they're starting to trickle in. This is a real thing, right? Now, what's cool about the last few years, and I'm so sorry if you hear my cat scratching in the background. What's been really cool is in recent years that has changed. People are starting to see the HR and people team function as a more strategic function, right? The projects that, also the company narcs. Lita, I hear you there. Yep. I heard one person once describe going to HR as going to the principal's office, and it was just so depressing. That's not how I see my role. So recently, though, we've seen a change, right? Especially with the pandemic. We've seen people see that HR is really a powerhouse when it comes to things like navigating a global pandemic, navigating a great resignation and building engagement in that world, or more recently, right, navigating this wave of pay transparency laws. How are we going to do that? We have to think of a whole new approach to pay and how we have these conversations and how we train our managers, right? All these things are changing. HR is now seen as a strategic function. The problem, however, is that while expectations of HR have changed, the relationship dynamic between HR and leadership teams in many cases has not changed. What do I mean by that? Most leaders, unfortunately, not all, but most leaders still don't see the HR function as a partnership function. They see it as strategy, yes, but not partnership. And I thought you all might get a little kick out of these gifts. So what I hear and see a lot is HR, go do this thing. There's a global pandemic, go do it. We need to get managers better at their jobs, go do it. We need to figure out these pay transparency laws, go do it. What I don't see is, how are we going to come together to do this as a team? How are we together going to enforce this change, roll out this initiative, ensure its success? Let me pause. I want to get a pulse check to make sure I'm not just talking into the ether and no one really agrees or knows what I'm talking about. Anybody else? Is this resonating with anyone? Okay, I'm seeing a few. Amanda, could you give Majay, oh, I'm so sorry, I missed your last name, Majay Pavon. I'm so sorry. Please tell me how to pronounce your name. I think I'm getting it wrong. Majay, if you could just tell me a little bit more, why does this slide resonate with you so much?
Yeah, it's a Mijay. Yeah, it really resonates because I think when we think about people, the natural thing is like, oh, well, the head of people or the people team is going to manage this. When you think about especially smaller organization, the entire leadership team has that job of making sure that our people are taken care of and are equipped to do their best work, and not just dumping it onto the HR leader to execute.
Yep, 100%. Let's call on another person. How about Philip? Philip Liu. Amanda, if you could give Philip access to unmute himself. And Philip, if you could just
Hi.
tell us a little, yeah, hi. Just why does this resonate with you? Why is this landing?
Yeah, I think maybe not today, but definitely a few years ago, it was more of just getting direction from, there was a goal that the teams wanted us to achieve. And I don't know that there was necessarily a very thought out rhyme and reason for it. The expectation was just, hey, go out and do it and let me know when it's complete. Rather than what I would use, the intentional word I'll use is partnership. So just didn't feel like a partnership.
Yes, 100%. That partnership piece is the piece that I see most often missing, which is too bad, right? Because we know, right? Anyone in the HR function knows that you could have the most well thought out initiative. And if leadership doesn't support it, doesn't back it up, doesn't put in the same effort, it's going to fall flat. It just will. I'm going to call on one more person because Kim St. John, your response in particular really stood out to me. You say you've been in HR since 1996. And even today at CHRO, you're still seeing this. Talk to us a little bit, if you could, about, the changing landscape in HR, or rather maybe the not changing landscape in HR.
Yeah. So, it's funny. We're talking about the same things that came up when I started in HR as a 22-year-old all those years ago. And it was always seen as the policymaker, like you said earlier, the tattle, I'm going to the principal's office, I'm going to tell on you. I still see that today. That hasn't changed. But this piece about just dumping it into HR, I don't know why. And it just continues to be an issue anytime there's, oh, HR's in charge of the culture, they're responsible for it. No, this is a partnership. We all have a hand in this. They don't look at me as their example. They look at you as their leader and their example. So I think a lot of times people just get so busy in their own worlds outside of leadership and management that when these kind of uncomfortable situations come up, it's easier for them to just say, take the easy road. Oh, HR will just handle it. No, it's really our job to help coach them, to help them understand that you're leaders now. We all have a hand in leadership for the entire organization. And by you being an active participant and leading certain things in these relationships, you're inherently going to build a stronger foundational relationship with your team, which in turn increases retention and engagement and indirectly attracting people to your team. So I look for that day. I'm in a great organization now where we're on that, but a lot of times people see us as the be all end all for every problem in the organization, from therapists to other things. And that's just not our case. So our jobs, at least in my department, is to make sure we're helping people understand and change that narrative. Like, no, you have a hand in this. We're here to be your partner. We're not the scapegoat.
I don't know if you're seeing this in the chat function, but you are getting a lot of agreement and plus ones and support on everything you've just said. I think worded it so well, right? It's sort of this idea of that's your job, not my job. That's HR's job, not leadership job, right? And
Yeah.
really what it is this is our job, right? This is a shared responsibility. It can't be successful if we're not, partnering together. Really, the HR function is to support others in getting, you know what I mean, and executing in their roles, and to sort of support organizational health. So I think you worded it so well. Thank you very much. I'm very glad I called on you. So the question then comes, what can we do about it, right? How do we start to change that narrative? Well, one of the things that I think is quite critical is relationship building. And the reason that I flag this is, unfortunately, as much as I and so many other people agree with everything that we've just been saying, the reality is you can't just force it on someone. You can't just force leadership to partner with you. They're not going to do it if they don't want to do it, if they don't buy in, right? And so what we can start to do is sort of, I've heard this this analogy. It's sort of like the bank, the trust bank, and you make deposits, the relationship bank, and you make deposits. You can start to build a strong relationship that incentivizes people naturally of their own volition to partner with you voluntarily. It's sort of like that saying, you catch more, what is it? Catch more bees with honey than vinegar. Am I saying that right? The idea is you build strong relationships with them at the individual level before you try to tackle the team level. At the individual level, to start to build that trust and relationship where the next time you have an initiative, they're going to want to help you of their own volition. So what do I mean by that? You can't come in, or you can, but I don't think it's quite as successful. If you come in and you say, hey, I'm HR, I've got all these initiatives, and here's what I need from you. I'm going to start assigning this, go do that. If you don't already have that buy-in and relationship, chances are very low that people are actually going to do the thing. However, if you work in a reverse order and you start to say, hey, let's talk about how I can help you. What are you doing on your team? How can we build a better connection? I haven't talked to you in 3 months. I want to put some time on your calendar. Let's actually get a cadence going here. If you start to help them, coach them with their own personal growth, perhaps even, right? Help them manage through a difficult conversation. What happens is you start to make deposits into that trust bank. And so over time, you will have allies that will trust, that will have buy-in, and that will even speak up for you at the leadership table if you yourself aren't already C-suite or VP level. Let me pause. How is this landing? And we might have some awkward silence for 7 seconds as people think through their responses. How does this land with people as I say this slide? Do you all feel like you're already doing this and it's not working? Does it feel counterintuitive? Is it frustrating? Like, why do I have to prove myself? You should already just trust and partner with me. Okay, I'm seeing some agreement. This is great. Roseanne Donahue, if you want to unmute yourself, what's landing with you here? Have you done this before? Is it working? Is it not working?
Hi, I've done it with certain executive leaders, and I'm finding that I need to be a little bit more deliberate. So I actually just set up quarterly touch bases with each executive leader to really kind of build and foster that relationship even further. How can I help them? What is the state of affairs in their department? Even coming prepared with kind of here's a snapshot of what's happened this past quarter in your department. What do we need to focus on for the next quarter? So I think that making it a little bit more deliberate going forward will help. But I totally agree that building the partnerships is key.
Love that. And Kelsey Beckfield, I think you make a really interesting point, and I want to touch on this, but I also want to give you a chance to elaborate if there's anything else you want to share here. You're sharing what I super hear, right? It feels more like a to-do list, a strategic partnership. Tell me a little more.
Yeah, just sometimes in building those relationships, it seems rather than to go quickly into the relationship where I want it to be a partnership, it's very much, here's my taskmaster, someone I know will get stuff done. So I'm just going to send it to them versus really creating a partnership.
I think that is such a strong point to make, because that's part of the challenge, right, that we're trying to mitigate here, is making sure that this is a we situation. I don't just do the things you assign me. Maybe they're not even the right things, right? We need to partner here. And so my recommendation would be, as you are doing these more tactical or short-term relationship building things, really think about smart questions that sort of reveal things to them that they might not have otherwise realized, right? Show them the value that you bring as a thought partner, even though you might be doing it in these really tactical ways, because over time that will start to build that trust. Okay, let me just look through because I'm getting a ton of comments here. Okay, all right, we might come back to this because in the interest of time, I'm gonna move on to the next slide, but Amanda's keeping an eye on these, so if anything will come back. And yes, it is a massive hill to climb. And I think that it's really important that we all remember that this is the long game, right? It's not going to be solved overnight. It really could be months before you get to a place where, oh, okay, I have proven my value. I have built that relationship with you. And now I'm going to start getting a return on some of my investments, right? On some of those deposits. All right. Okay. The next thing I want to talk about is two-way partnership. Now, this is really key because the reality is sometimes between HR and leadership, we kind of butt heads, okay? Be honest, all right? Give me a yes or a no in the comments section if you've ever come to a disagreement with leadership where you were just convinced, they're wrong, you're right. Why can't they just hear you? Why can't they just do the thing? Because you can see it so clearly. You've been doing this for years. If they just listen to you, think everything would be fixed. Anybody? Yes, no. Have you ever experienced this? Yeah, we're getting a lot of yeses. Let's see who I can call on. Nahili Gomez, and please let me know if I've pronounced that incorrectly. Nahili, I'd love to hear more from you. Tell me a little bit more about that experience. Tell me about that time or a series of times when you were butting heads.
Yeah, Nayeli, the H is silent.
Thank you.
The times that I've butted heads has been typically when I get really myopic in the HR perspective. Because it's either there's like a regulation or a policy that really is in play that makes it difficult to say no. And so I found myself just being able to relate that. But if I take like a couple of steps back and think, what are they actually trying to solve? I've found that I can kind of work around that no.
Oh, I love that. Okay, I feel like you're getting ahead in the, like you already know what I'm about to talk about. So that's great. But I love that you're acknowledging that, yes, sometimes that there's that instinct reaction where it's yes, no, I'm right, you're wrong. Let's call on, let's see, one more person. Charlene Frank, tell me a little bit more about this. Why do you think this happens? What causes you to butt heads? And what does it feel like in that moment when there's disagreement?
It feels very frustrating because I can usually see the train wreck coming, and based on my experience, I know what we should be doing. However, I've learned from the past that I sometimes need to either break it down in what I call small steps, sometimes for leadership to get on board, or sometimes just explain to them the cost of not doing it. And for the most part, I would say sometimes when I show them the cost of not doing it, then they will get on board. Or if I break it down into small steps, then they may change their minds. But there are sometimes when I have to take a step back and just, do what I'm being told to do, and then wait for the train wreck to come and still not say I told you so. So
I think you're making a really valuable point here, which is sometimes, unfortunately, people do need to learn from their own mistakes, right? And it's sort of about, finding the way to mitigate this to the extent possible within your means. And sometimes it's just about finding a middle ground, right? So thank you all for contributing. Yeah, all of that resonates with me. And I think if we want to get into some specifics, some of the most common areas where I think people tend to butt heads between HR and leadership are, manager trainings, DEI initiatives, guidelines around salary, transparency, increases, offers, performance management. I'd actually love to do a pulse check to see if I got these right and you all agree. Can I get a yes if anyone has ever experienced butting heads when it comes to things like rolling out a training, whether it be a manager training or an employee training, and maybe you just cannot get buy-in from leadership? Okay, yes, compensation philosophy, yes, yes, yes. Okay, Julia Burkham, if you could unmute yourself and tell me, when it comes to a training rollout and getting pushback, what are the reasons that you tend to hear for pushback on why we're not going to do a training for managers or for employees? I'll just give it another.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I haven't gotten pushback on the training aspect, but I have gotten pushback on like pay transparency and compensation bands and stuff like that.
Okay, so tell me more, because we're seeing actually a couple of people jump in with similar things. Comp philosophy, I'm seeing from Lucy, from Kevin. Tell me a little bit more. What kind of pushback do you get?
So the pushback that I've gotten from, and it's mixed from our senior leadership team, but some people on the senior leadership team who are opposed to it feel like, well, if customer success sees that engineering is paid this and they're paid that, or our employees who are in different countries or in different states see a differentiation or differing pay, they're going to have like questions and wonder why they're not getting paid the same. And obviously there are very different roles and expectations and like impact depending on the role. So I think that there are ways to navigate those conversations, but that's generally the pushback that I've gotten so far on pay transparency.
Yep, you're getting a lot of +1s in the comments section. So thank you very much for sharing. You've definitely touched on a chord. I'm going to call on one more person, Kevin Badge. If you could unmute yourself, tell us about the performance management piece. What kind of pushback do you get when it comes to performance management? I mean, especially because, all companies want high performance. What's the problem? Tell me more.
Well, it's a typical, story of, they want the high performers, but don't spend enough time praising them. And then the low performers, they don't want to do all the work to get them out the door. So it's, they want to basically say, well, this person's just not working out. We need to get rid of them, but they won't go through the steps of going through, any sort of disciplinary process. They just want it taken care of.
What's interesting with your response is we're sort of hearing that echo of that original discussion, right? Where this is a you thing, not a me thing. HR handle it, not me. Why do I have to have the hard discussion? Why can't you just fix it? I've told you what the problem is, right? Oh, you're getting some +1s. Angela Owen said this, all caps. Yep. Okay, so thank you for sharing. You're definitely also hitting on a chord that is resonating with people. So what do we do about this? So we're going to talk a little bit more about how you can get to a better place in the next section. But the first thing that I really want to impart on everyone is remembering, as some of you have already flagged, right? Our way isn't necessarily always the only way. And if we think in that way, it's going to be really hard to win people over. Yes, maybe we see the train wreck happening, but if you're saying the same thing and no one is hearing you, you've got to try a different way, right? You've got to try and meet someone halfway, find compromise, find the middle ground. So the first thing that I recommend is when a disagreement comes up, I want to acknowledge that feelings of defensiveness can come up on both sides, or feelings of, I've already seen this happen before. I'm in the HR function. You hired me for my HR advice, but you're not taking my HR advice. Why, right? All of those feelings can come up, and yet those won't be productive. And so the first thing you should do is make sure that you're pausing and approaching with curiosity, right? What's your biggest concern with this initiative? What's your reason for pushback? Why does this scare you? What's a more reasonable approach to you? What would feel less scary? What would make you more inclined to move forward with this initiative? And I want to give some specific examples of what this could look like in action, because I think, I was talking to my manager earlier today. We were talking about how people will say, make sure you ask smart questions in an interview. But then people wonder, okay, but what are those smart questions? Give me examples. So I want to give clear examples to you all here, right? referring back to some of the areas where people butt heads from the last slide. Maybe you know that the right approach to handle a management issue you're currently facing is a 3-part management series where you cover, 3 big topics. It's coaching, it's feedback, and it's delegating, right? But you can't make that happen because they argue there's not enough time, people are busy with other things. Okay, what's the compromise we can find? We already have time on the calendar for all hands. Why don't we replace one of the all hands with a manager training? Another one could be, hey, instead of a company-wide hour-long DEI training, why don't we do a pilot? We'll pick one team that's experiencing the most issues. We'll just test it with them, see how it's going. Maybe instead of doing 1 hour-long training, we do little micro lessons that are 5 minutes or less, and we just sprinkle them throughout the year as refreshers. Shameless plug, by the way, for Athena's DEI training where we do this. I think it's quite effective. Or maybe if you're like me, you get really in the weeds. You like to be nuanced. You have all the thoughts on the most complex performance management job leveling rubric, but no one's going to read it. No one's going to take the time to read 5 pages of it. So instead, you find a shorter 1-page version of this. Oh, thank you for the support, Katie. Love it. I'm glad you're enjoying Athena's trainings. Let's look at an example of this in practice. Okay, so this is actually something that I and Athena navigated, where I really wanted to put in all these really comprehensive performance structures, and the reality I had to grapple with was people are busy. HR priorities are not necessarily every employee's priority, right? I'm not even talking about leadership here. I'm trying to get managers buy-in to read this thing, right? How do I get their time and their attention in a short amount of span, in a short span of time? Well, what we did, rather than doing a whole comprehensive, here's how you monitor and assess performance, I just created 3 temperature check questions. And I said, managers, if you can do me a favor and ask yourself these 3 questions for each of your direct reports. And if the answers are iffy, reach out to me. That's all I ask of you. It's going to take you literally 3 minutes or less. Did this, and let me tell you, several managers reached out immediately thereafter, because this is a thing they can do in 3 minutes or less. This is a thing that is not scary, that is not intimidating, that is not filled with HR language that is confusing, right? I'm going to read some of them aloud so that you can see how they can really just pack a punch, right? Instead of saying, hey, assess performance based on the job levels, looking at these complicated rubrics, looking at all their performance and the feedback you've given over the past 6 months, ask yourself, ultimately, is my direct report freeing up my time or making my job harder? If I were to open the role today, knowing what I know about their performance, would I hire them again? What would happen if they turned in their resignation today? Would I be relieved or would I panic, right? These are very poignant, quick, short things that get the job done. They're not my ideal 5-page comprehensive, whatever the case may be. But you know what? Maybe my approach wasn't actually the right approach in the end, because maybe fewer people would have read it. Maybe it would have confused people. So I was able to achieve the same end goal with a different approach. And the analogy I always like to use is there are multiple ways to get to 4. 2 + 2, 1 + 3, 4 + 0, 6 - 2, if you're thinking out of the box, right? So always remember that there are multiple ways to get to your end goal. I'm seeing a couple of comments. I'm seeing love this, excitement, some curiosity. Let me call on, let's see, Alexandra Bullock. You seem in particular excited about this. Tell me more. Why are you obsessed with this?
Because I don't know, it's almost like when you hear kids talk and it's so simple and you almost forget like how simple questions can be to get to an endpoint. Where when I read these, like sometimes you might be too emotional when thinking about a direct report, where these are just like very pointed questions that get you from point A to point P extremely fast, and there's no fluff or color, or it's not emotionally drawn. It's just, these should be like there's one answer to move forward kind of thing. So I love this.
Thank you. I'm seeing a couple of interesting questions from Peglise, if I'm pronouncing that right, and also from Julia Burkham, right? Like, is this the full performance process? How do I ensure productivity? Because there's so much more nuance that can go into performance management. So I'm actually going to steal the language from someone who already posted here, which is, it's a great micro win, right? Is this my full performance process? No, it is not, but it was the first step in getting buy-in. And so then what happened was managers started reaching out to me. So then we start delving deeper. Now we have a deeper conversation with the people who flag a concern, rather than I'm going to take 30 or minutes or an hour of everyone's time. Only the people who flag a concern, we're going to talk and we're going to dig deeper. And then by the time we do the performance review, I've already got buy-in because Melanie gave me those smart questions. Oh, that landed with me so quickly. It was easy. I'm going to pay more attention the next time she rolls out something, right? So certainly this is not the end all be all, but it's that micro win. It's that quick, short, it's that deposit that you're making to the relationship building, to the strategic thought partnership, so that people start to buy into what it is that you're giving. I'm seeing a couple of other things come in. Okay, in the interest of time, I'm going to move on to the next section. We've got just one section left, and then I will try very hard to keep time for Q&A. Thank you all for keeping this a robust and interactive session. The last thing we'll see on this one quick session, section, by the way, is make sure that you're tracking and sharing insights, right? So if you're having these micro wins, don't let them just disappear. You want to make sure that your wins get noticed. Take pulse surveys, consolidate employee feedback, run metrics reports, right? If you see that, hey, we were able to catch 5 performance issues 3 months earlier than we would have because of this approach, that's a thing that people care about and that you should celebrate. If you learn that your training pilot for this one small team had immediate impact, say that, because again, what you're doing is you're making these deposits for future bigger initiatives, right? It's really hard to get buy-in for a big, expensive initiative right off the bat. You need to build off these smaller steps, share and highlight the wins, and then you've got that buy-in the next time when you're ready to make that much bigger initiative, okay? All right, so let's go into the last section, which is reframing. Goals reframe, initiative reframe, problem identifying reframe, all the reframes, okay? So give me a yes in the comments if you've ever heard this argument. HR is not revenue producing, exclamation point. Oh, I'm seeing the yeses just come right in, Okay, oh my gosh, always. All right, let's see, who can I call on that I haven't called on already? Let's do Erica Louie. If you could unmute yourself, you gave me a yes with an exclamation point. Why does this land so well for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it lands since this is something that we've heard from every new headcount that we're adding. And it initially comes out mostly in headcount planning as we're planning for our teams, and asking for headcount increases on our team is the hardest, I find, out of any other group, because we're not directly tied to revenue. And I hear that often and frequent. So I've heard this multiple times.
Yep. I feel you there. Let's call on one more person. Daniel Urias. I'm so sorry if I'm pronouncing that right. Please correct me. Haha, yes. I love that you can approach this with a little bit of humor. Let me ask, how does it feel when you hear this argument? HR isn't revenue producing. How does that feel?
Oh my gosh, it makes me laugh. It's funny because they are absolutely correct. But what I like to do is I like to kind of reframe and kind of pivot, where we are absolutely not revenue producing, but we are revenue, saving essentially. So I see everything as a resource, and we're able to go ahead and save here and there by adjusting certain items there. And I try to make it a point to understand the business model so we can see how that fits in and how that ties into the day-to-day, to see how HR can be integrated more so.
Oh, interesting. You know what? I kind of want to challenge that we're not revenue producing, because I do think we are, but I don't think we have time to get into it. You and I touch base afterwards. I'm really curious to hear your take on this. I want to call on one more person. Okay, Melissa Smith. I just heard this morning. I'm so sorry, Melissa. Tell me more.
Hi, yeah, it's Melissa. So we are trying to get a bunch of marketing done, like design work for some programs, and we were just told basically that they cannot assist us any like factors that aren't revenue building right now. So a lot of our stuff is all being pushed to the side whether it's from marketing or from, getting budgets pushed through, just all the fun stuff, we're kind of put at the back burner when the company is rushed.
Yep, I hear you all there. All right. So I'm hearing a lot of people identifying with this, whether it's because I do think it's revenue producing or I'm forgetting your name. I'm sorry. I cannot remember your name. I'm so sorry. But the person who argued, like, even if we're not revenue producing, we're revenue saving, right? Whichever side you fall on, right? I'm hearing, oh, this is not a valid argument, right? So with that said, here's what I say when I hear this kind of argument. It's important to know your audience. Unfortunately, HR for the sake of HR has just never been a compelling case for business leaders. And it probably never will be, because what they're focused on is revenue. That's what they're focused on. And so, yes, as HR professionals, we know that at the end of the day, we can save, produce revenue, all the things, right? We know happy employees lead to higher engagement, higher productivity, increased innovation, right? And so what is our response? What does our response tend to be in the HR world when we hear, hey, HR is not revenue producing? It's much of what you all have said, right? Let's define how HR initiatives feed into revenue producing initiatives, right? Here's the thing I want to flag is that unfortunately, when you say this, that is a long time to see that investment come out, right? So if you say something like, we need to invest in manager training to make sure we don't lose high performance, perfectly valid. I hear that, makes perfect sense to me. Someone who's not in HR hears this and probably thinks, yeah, I don't know, it's not the immediate issue. Yeah, I know that I can save 50K right now by canceling this contract. I know I can save 50K by now, or I can make 50K by now by closing this deal, right? They're thinking about right now. They're not thinking about 3 months. I don't want to invest for 3 months down the line to maybe have this manager training become effective, right? And so what we see is when we make these arguments, they tend to get shot down because people can't see the impact today. And so it's a no, right? So here's how I recommend that we reframe our arguments, right? Business leaders, they're not focused on long-term, it's the short term. And so what doesn't tend to work is what I just said, right? So telling your leadership team, hey, you need to dedicate more resources to this because it's leading to a toxic work culture, high performers are leaving. Instead, what you could say is, hey, these 5 underperformers that have been here for the past 3 months have lost the company a combined total of $125,000. I did the math. And maybe you use compensation, right? We could have let them go by now because the team is effective without them. And this is the amount that they earned in salary. These 3 business deals fell through because they didn't pursue them effectively. Or these contracts that are super expensive that they approved because they were not paying attention to whatever the case may be. Here's a lower cost, more effective option, or we can do it in-house, right? All those things, that's money you've lost today that you could be saving today if you made these changes, if you managed performance more effectively today, right? Do you see how that change goes from, hey, 3 months of management down the line to today, every day that we pass that we're not doing this thing, you're losing money. You know that, right? That completely changes the tone. Let me pause. How is this landing with you as I say this? And I'm going to give it like 7 awkward seconds in the chat box for anyone to comment on this. Does this throw anyone off? Anyone agree, disagree, think, what are you talking about, Melanie? Yep. Great point, Lynn. Got to give a one. Okay, getting some agreement. Oh, getting a long one here. Okay, let's read through some of these. Sarah Lufke, can you go ahead and unmute yourself? Tell me a little bit more about this, if you can, to the extent possible. Your leader just told you to reframe in a similar way. I'm curious about this.
Yeah, absolutely. So I work closely with our head of talent at my organization, and we are trying to do a little bit of change management around requisition approval process. Right now, it's a little bit all over the board in our startup, and so looking to streamline that a bit. Anyway, I am building out a proposal to our CFO, and she asked me to basically reframe it a bit to have some more like hard facts and dollar numbers in the presentation. So this definitely resonated with me.
Good, awesome. I'm super glad to hear that. And I hope this also shows some of the specific, those tangible things that you can lean on, right? How do I look for where the money is being lost? Because it always is, right? We know that if you've got underperformers, if you've got high performers that are leaving, that leads to lost revenue. So how do we identify those and quantify them for the leadership team? All right, cool. All right, so with that said, I know we're running short on time, so let me give you all some action items for today, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. So I encourage you all, take a screenshot of this slide and just give yourself these assignments to do over the next week or so that you don't let this opportunity slip you by, right? Take some time over the next week and pick 1 to 2 team members on the leadership team that you're going to start building that relationship with. Maybe you already have relationships with some, but others are weaker. How can you go about building that relationship with them? Set up a coffee chat, ask how you can help them, right? Start to build that foundation and allyship. Second, pick a project that you're getting pushback on. How can you change it? How can you adjust your approach for whether it be shorter attention spans, lower cost, right? Same example that I gave, right? Okay, we don't want to do a robust manager performance rubric. Fine. Here are 3 questions that I need all managers to ask. It's going to take you, 3 minutes or less. Do that and then come back to me if you have issues, right? And the last one is pick a problem area in your organization and find a way to quantify the revenue loss, the impact to revenue as a result of this problem area every day that it gets unaddressed, okay? Hope this helps. Now, just before I jump into Q&A, I do want to flag, for anyone who's interested, hopefully this session went well. If you're excited, we have more sessions coming up. The next one is happening on February 14th. We're going to be talking about HR situations that make even the most experienced HR people sweat, all kinds of things that make people nervous, whether it be, when performance overlaps with medical issues, what do you do? So if you're interested, take a screenshot, sign up with a QR code. We're happy to have you. And lastly, we'd love your feedback on how this session went, what worked, what didn't work. Again, take a screenshot, use the QR code, click on the link, whatever works for you. Thank you, Amanda, for sharing in the comments section. We are hungry for feedback. So with that said, I'm going to open it up to Q&A. We've got some questions already in the Q&A box, and I'm also going to let people add any more if they have, either in the Q&A or the chat. I'm going to go ahead and start and kick it off. So let's see. What are ways you can measure progress towards senior leadership alignment? I think this is such a great question. It's anonymous, so I can't give credit. What I will say is this. I think personally that sometimes I think measurements can be overly contrived, right? Like I need this metric and I need to have specific numbers I assign to it. I actually think the way that you can see whether or not alignment is getting better or worse is how much pushback do I get with every new initiative that I present? How often do they approach with a pushback versus curiosity? Because if they're asking questions like, okay, I'm interested, tell me more, that to me is a sign that things are going in the right direction. If the immediate response is pushback, that to me is a sign that maybe you're not there yet, right? Another way to measure this might be, okay, when I ask managers and leadership to partner with me on a new initiative, how often do they actually do it versus how often, sorry, my dog's a little needy today, versus how often do they just forget or they don't have the time to, for example, remind their teams to take the DEI training, to remind their teams that the performance reviews are due on Friday, right? How much do you see this partnership happening? More or less, right? And every time just tick it off, make a note of it, right? And at the end of the month, maybe just share what you're observing. Hey, I'm getting more pushback. I'm not getting curiosity. I'm not getting questions. I'm not getting partnership. Okay, let me go to the next one. Managing up with first-time founders or people managers. Okay, this is an exciting one. I'm going to answer to the extent that I can without having too much context. If you want to get more context, feel free to drop a note in the comments and Amanda will unmute you. But my recommendation is similar to what I said earlier about that, those deposits. Don't try, and my recommendation is don't come in hard and try and control the situation and just expect that they're going to trust you, right? In an ideal world, of course they would, right? And how much less frustrating would it be? The reality is, as with all relationships, you need to build that trust first. You need to prove your value. You need to prove that the advice you're giving is sound. And so I would say, start by asking lots of questions, be really curious, getting those micro wins, and then over time, you'll be able to manage up more effectively, right? I will say closely tied into that is the best is when you can coach people to realizing the right answer for themselves. You see this even with manager training, right? If I tell a direct report what to do, they might be resistant or they won't learn how to come to the right solution on their own, versus if I coach them to find the solution on their own, they can then replicate that behavior. And also they're more bought in because they, came up with it, right? Okay, how to push back on pushy SLT as standalone HR and new to the business. Do you know what? I actually don't know what SLT stands for. So if you're comfortable, feel free to either DM me just to clarify, and then I can always, okay, senior leadership team. How to push back on pushy senior leadership team as standalone HR and new to the business. Yeah, I think it really comes back to that same thing. You've got to build that buy-in, and also you've got to help them before expecting them to help you, right? You've got to make those deposits first. Otherwise, of course, in an ideal world, they're just going to help you. But from their perspective, why would they help you? That's your job, not mine, right? So you've got to reframe. Let's see. What metrics does leadership care about, right? We talked about this one, always revenue. Do you have any advice for HR professionals who are starting to take on a role where they interact with senior leadership more often and are going to have to start getting their buy-in, support, and alignment? Yep, a lot of what I've discussed, and I would say get FaceTime. FaceTime is really important. I'm not about, meetings just for meetings. That's not what I'm saying, but I am saying that your team needs to see you. They need to know you. They need to hear you. And so set up coffee chats. Don't be scared to put time on the CEO's calendar. Don't be scared to, hey, share some insights, unsolicited insights that they didn't even know to think about, right? Okay, let's see. I'm seeing a couple of other ones come in from, let's see, Teja or Tasia. Does anyone have any recommendations for training for HRBPs looking to upskill my team and move them out of transactional work into more strategic work? Do you know what? I would actually love to open this up to the audience. Does anyone want to help answer this question for Tasia? I'm just gonna be quiet for a second. I'm just a big fan of peer coaching. If no one answers in the next 5 seconds, I'll jump in. Oh, okay. I need to hear more about this. Okay. I remember the H is silent. Is it Niley? Amanda, can you unmute her so that she can share what she means about the appreciative theory?
Yeah, I've been learning about this and I've been really excited. It's the concept of helping co-create for the future with your leadership team of what would it be like if we could do this, so they're invested in the outcome of it. There's a couple of really good books on it, and it's changed the way that I've approached my conversations when I do meet with my leadership team.
Oh, I love that. Okay. I'm seeing some other great responses going to virtual summit, design thinking. Oh, yes. I've heard about agile thinking as well. The agile approach in HR. I can share more about that if anyone's curious. Amplify Academy. Yes. Lars is really great. Yes. Okay. Everyone, if you're not familiar with these resources, copy and paste them because they're all really good. I've seen them. Okay. Lovely. We've got just a couple more that have come in. Hey, Melanie, I'd love more examples of those smart questions to find middle ground when you're in a disagreement. My team will be presenting some prototypes for a new performance management model soon, and I'm definitely expecting pushback. Okay, this is great. I love this. Okay, so I'm going to leave this to the comment section too in case anyone has any suggestions. But because we're short on time, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to save this question. And what we'll do is we always send a follow-up and share the recording after the session. So what I'll do, Amanda, if you can, in one of our follow-ups, especially if you sign up for our newsletters, I will include some smart questions to ask to find middle ground. That way I just have more time to think through and I can provide some helpful things you can take with you. And then what do you do when you always have negative feedback about a people manager, but when you share it constructively with them or their manager or your manager, nothing happens? Ooh, okay. So for me and everyone in the comment section, feel free to agree, disagree, share your own thoughts. this to me actually comes back to a performance management issue. It sounds like this person, if they're not being receptive to feedback, that's an individual issue rather than a team or a leadership alignment issue, in which case you may need to have that direct conversation, right? Hey, part of your job as a people manager is being receptive to feedback and taking action on it, right? And if they're not, then again, I'm happy to give you more tips on how to manage performance and underperformers or people who are unreceptive to it. But I would just, I would sort of put it in that camp. All right, everyone, we're just about at time, so I'm going to go ahead and end the call for everyone, but I wanted to say a big thank you to everyone who tuned in. Again, share your feedback, sign up for the next session, and we will share for the Anon who asked about smart questions. We will share that in our follow-up. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this and hope this has helped you all. All right, thanks all. Bye, everyone.